So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation truly comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage of the second son of Ibrahim. So then we can understand the time of the end and the relationship with the Creator and the lineage of the first son and the second son of Ibrahim. As we understand, Ibrahim was the friend of God. So then we understand the first son as the layer of the Gentiles, and then we understand the second son as the layer of tabernacling. How is it going to be in the future? There are so many debates where we can have the organization then placed in an area where we can understand per then the prophecy, bringing us then with a conclusion of the future. There is none other than taxation. If taxation is not done, then the governments are done away with. It is simple. It's very simple, because then from the perspective of Galah, or the revelation of the time of the end as tabernacling, and also as Gentile level, comes then a neutral system where taxation is going to be the utmost important. Without taxation, the media is going to be absolutely, in quote, murderous. They are not going to spare a word of every situation anymore. You know why? Because when the sq1 system of China comes, what's going to be is this: people and also the media, they're going to be investing in the system. And any given failure of the government, they won't admit. It is a system then is absolutely exacting. So then whatsoever is done in the government has to be done in clear. And a clear, plain understanding, because there is no funding coming in. As far as we understand, when the system comes, what can you expect? You can expect then the mid-person gone. You expect then the retailers gone. You expect then banking, savings of the banking, or savings of the people then gone, invested. You can expect then checking related with the work, the bare minimum. So we are speaking of a subsystem absolutely working in a skeleton status because of the advent of the new system. How are you going to be making promises to people where then for sure you won't have funding as far as we understand from the system? The wealth of the world is going to be distributed evenly. And that's why people then, they have only to have a link with a banking, or whatsoever country they are found at, only a link with a local bank, and then they transfer their funding into the system where the government can't monitor. And then whatsoever left is then taxation. How are we going to justify then how they are going to pay the people? Because we must understand from the viewpoint of the prophet Daniel. What was he explaining? He explaining then a time of deceit. He was explaining a time of then the knowledge would increase, and then the separation of the kingdoms. As you can understand, there is a reason why there is a separation, not because it's only fun of it. There is an economical reason why the kingdoms then are going to be divided. Because let's say, for instance, a realm requires a system where then a person in charge of those realms has then limited ability of governing. But yet, amongst themselves, it is a subsystem. Okay, so then comes a new system that's neutral. Okay, new system that's neutral amongst the nations or realms, or any way you want to name it. However, there is then 10 plus 5 nations or realms making the United Kingdom. Where then Lady Elizabeth, for instance, she's in charge of the whole gang. It is then a subsystem in itself. Whatsoever way you observe it, she's on the top of it. Limited or not limited, she's up there. Then comes the realms. However, there is a system coming, making it neutral amongst the nations, where then the realm can't monitor it. They can log on and be part of it, but they can't monitor it. What is the normal factor of a subsystem when it becomes imbalanced? Would not be the balancing of the system? You know what's going to take place? Those nations, they are strong, or the realms, they are strong, and they have to pay for those who are weak. So let's say, for instance, Jamaica, it's part of the realm, one of the realms of the kingdom, United Kingdom. Let's say they began then to order, and they began to invest for themselves. But then, let's say if they neglected their obligations before the realm, what do you think it would cause? Because liking it or not, they are under a realm under Elizabeth. She can change it at any moment. She's part of it. They have their own economical system, but they are linked together via a subsystem. Otherwise, you can't have 10 plus 5 realms under Elizabeth. You have to understand a subsystem. However, when this subsystem is compared then with the system to come, and then if these realms then they don't have the same funding, quantity of funding equal, what does it take place? Whatsoever funding then is available is going to be invested, because the investments are going to be always up. Then you find some of the nations over there neglecting their services. What are they going to use? They're going to use their expertise to say, well, we are part of the realm, but they are not taking care of the subsystem. Is going to force the other members of the subsystem then to stabilize the problem. It's always worked like this. You can't deny it. When the people they are confronted with money, and money then becomes available, do you think they are going to pay their dues if they have a subsystem that can sustain them? Well, watch the situation with Spain, for instance, or then other countries, Greece. They have not done their homework. The ethics are not the same as Germany. What went on? Germany had to give of their resources in order to stabilize the system. Well, you have the example of then Germany and the other countries. What do you think is going to be when then the sq1 system comes? An imbalance of the system is going to be generated sometimes purposely. And then the realm has to stabilize it. And then those who are earning a lot, they have to make for those who are not. And how are they going to prove it? So then the only area available for governments is taxation. Simply do what the Savior said. Give to the government what belongs to the government, and give to God what belongs to God. You can't mix those anymore. Otherwise, the nations, they won't have any funding. Their industry must be very strong to maintain then the market stable. Because have this in mind, as nations, then they are developing, industry then in their countries are then producing. Then, if they produce, you can have a flow of economy. If nations are heavily in debt, what does it do? You don't have a flow of industry. In order to compensate for it, you have to print out more money. As you do, then the funding they go out because they are not being invested in the country. So it is a vicious cycle where then nations are going to be printing, but then the economy doesn't have enough momentum as far as its production is concerned. And without taxation, then there is no hope whatsoever. That's why when the Savior was saying, give it to the government, it belongs to the government, he was very serious. He knew in the future, during the time of the restoration, he would have a system amongst the nations, providing them with a neutrality, so then we would understand the first and second son's relationship. So then what is left? Taxation is the most important. And who's going to be in charge of the future? Freighters. There is no government. Try to understand, the governments of the world, they are obsoleted. That's why then the Messiah, when he was speaking with Yohanan and the Shaliach in the first holy city, what did he say? He didn't say in the kingdoms. He said in the freighters. Yes, the nations and the kingdoms of the world would be doing trade with China, but the Messiah places an emphasis of the freighters. So then, understand the emphasis. It's not nations. Freighters. When you find an 8th chapter, what was then the main focus of the understanding? The third part of the ships. There was a reason why the Messiah could say, and then the kingdom of the end. No, he said the ships. Freighters. Those are going to be in charge of the economy of the planet. Because of these transportation leadership worldwide, you have to have the hand of the Creator or it gets out of hand. Africa is going to be extremely rich, beyond imagination of your wildest dreams. But then, because of the social condition of the country, they're going to slaughter each other. They're going to buy weapons and absolutely destroy the entire continent if they are not cautious. Can the nations then intervene on their behalf? No, they have so many riches, they're going to be involved with their own economy. That's why the Creator then must be involved with it, because He decides then how is it going to be the flow of these nations as these freighters then are in charge. And then amongst the nations comes then the first son. The Ishmaelites then, they receive understandings from the second son, because the second son is related with tabernacling. The second son receives direct understanding from heaven. In turn, they instruct the first son. Not because they are saying what to do. No, they are giving them the future. That's the point. It's not saying for you to do A, B, C. It's giving you what the future is going to bring. That's what prophecy means. So then the first son comes to the tabernacling, receives understandings of the future, and they act as such to make sure they are secured when the future comes. And then the rest of the world, they're going to be involved with trade, with investments, and governments are secondary. The main function of the government is going to be paying people to take care of roads, take care of water, taking care of electricity, and making sure the basic services of the society then is provided. But have this in mind, governments are going to work with the skeleton status. So that brings the whole balance of the entire world and its system and its transportation. Because whatsoever the great prophet Yeshayahu said, even the heathen would understand his mighty works, then we begin to understand how is it going to be. No taxation, the government then is obsolete. So let's make sure then governments, they get their taxes, because this is what the Creator told them to do. There is an agenda of organization where then if you do not have tax, you can't pay your people. The government can log on in the Chinese system and then invest. Absolutely they can, but then how are they going to pay for the workers? Because you have to have production in the country to make sure the economy flows. But then when there is not enough production, not enough industry, what does it do? Forces you to print out more money. As you do, the more you print, the more is invested. The more is invested, then deprives the country of production. It's a vicious cycle where then it gets halted.